I'm thrilled to have the panel begin and would like to introduce our moderator. So for our panel on the economy, and our moderator will introduce the individual panelists. Our moderator is Kai Ryssdal, who's the host and has been the host of Marketplace since 2005. He previously hosted the Marketplace Morning Report for more than 4 years. Before joining Marketplace, he was a reporter and substitute host for the California Report. Before his career in public radio, he spent 8 years in the Navy and then in the U.S. Foreign Service. So I am delighted to turn things over to our moderator, Kai Ryssdal.
Jed, thanks very much. Every time I hear one of those introductions, it reminds me I need to write a new one so that I can get a new bio out there. But anyway, I'm going to go very quickly down the panel, and then we're going to get this show on the road. We're going to go a little over, but not too terribly much, and because I know we want to save some time for questions from the audience for the folks that are up here on this topic that, as Jed mentioned at the beginning, the other panels of the day, the education panel and the climate panel that preceded ours before lunch, they all revolve around issues of the California and the national economy, and you can't get there from here if you don't talk about the economy. So to do that with us today, Esmael Adibi from Chapman University. He runs the Gary Anderson Research Center there. He is our voice of academic reality on the panel as to academic reality from our speakers, which we had before. Fred Ruiz is the voice of business and reality on the ground and how you get an economy to run. He's the chairman emeritus and the co-founder of Ruiz Foods out of Dinuba, California. He has on more boards than you can shake a stick at. McClatchy, the University of California Board of Regents, to name just a couple, chairman, and also the Chamber of Commerce, right? California Chamber of Commerce. To my left, Van Jones. He's a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress via the Obama White House. His specialty, his area of concentration is green-collar employment, sustainable job growth, those kinds of things. And we're going to be talking about one of those issues that Laura mentioned, how you sustain a growth rate in this economy while making it sustainable, if you want to frame it that way. And finally, down at the end, Carl Gordino from the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. He's the president and CEO there. It's a public policy group representing about 300 businesses in Silicon Valley. And for those of you who think you've done enough today already, he does marathons and Ironman triathlons. So get out and do a couple of laps at the break, all right, and you feel better about yourself. We're going to start with a very broad-based, and I will confess slightly preceded, pre-acknowledged question for these guys, which is this, and maybe you can help us with the economic reality of this one from an academician standpoint, Esmael. Are we far along enough in the recovery now? Have we dealt with the immediate crisis so that we can now turn our attention a little bit to focusing on what's going to make the California and national economy grow over the much longer term?
No, we're not out of the woods yet. First of all, just echo, I agree for everything that both of you said. I just want to say that our problem, nationwide and statewide, is a balance sheet problem. Banks have balance sheet problem, consumers have balance sheet problem, and the only entity that is doing good is businesses. They're cleaning their balance sheet, they're loaded with cash. Having said this, we do forecast for California and U.S. economy. We released it yesterday. At least we're seeing some ray of hope, mainly because of improvement in the national economy. We think the growth rate is going to be about 3.3% this coming year. And interestingly, it's driven by consumer spending, because we concentrate on unemployed, but we have 90% of people who are unemployed. And the fact that the recession is over, the confidence is picking up and pent-up demand is kicking in. So consumer spending is going to roughly grow about 3%. That's going to give us national economy about 3.3% growth for the coming year. The second element helpful for California's economy is export, as you mentioned. Our export, our trading partner, the 10 top ones, are all concentrated, Mexico, Canada, and Asia. We are not as much exposed to Eurozone. There are only 2 countries there that we depend on, Germany and Netherlands, and they're growing very rapidly. So we anticipate our export to do well. And the third element, which is construction spending, that's a local variable, is the stabilizing. We're still seeing decline in construction activity, not that much in residential, but non-residential, not that much in non-residential, but residential is showing a little bit of a pickup. So when we put all of those pieces together, we think job growth this coming year in California is going to be roughly about 170,000. Now, this pales in comparison to what we should do coming out of a deep recession. Now, why, as Michael said, why we're not doing as well, both national and locally? We have never had a strong recovery without the housing market recovery. We are building nationally about 600,000 units, whereas in previous deep recession, when we came out of it, 1.5, 1.6 million annual units were built. So this recovery is going to be slow. Unemployment is going to be a sticky downward. But I think we are getting to the point that banks are cleaning up their balance sheet. Actually, major banks have done it. Regional bank, community banks still have problems. Households are repairing their balance sheet. Saving rates is going up. And at the same time, debt level is getting under control. So this is the earliest stage of recovery, but it is not, don't count on anything, a miracle. This is going to be slow.
Fred Ruiz, you're the voice of business on the panel. How are you feeling?
Well, I definitely feel that we're still in an economic crisis in California, and I think there's also an incredible sense of urgency for us to really do something. We don't have a whole lot of time. In the next couple of years, if we don't begin creating a more competitive environment for business, a more positive environment for business, I'm getting worried that it's going to be too late. So, and I look at Ruiz Foods, our company, we're doing very, very well. We're in the food business. People have to eat. We're a great value and a great price. But, I'm chairman emeritus now, and I can tell you that, the new management is looking at, next steps. Where are we going to grow next? And California really does not look to be a very positive environment for us to expand our business.
When you talk to the current CEO, do you guys have conversations about hiring at all?
Well, the current CEO is my son. So, I'm really worried about my job as well. Yeah, we have a lot of discussions, about what's the right thing to do and whatnot. So.
Yeah, but do those discussions include hiring people to work?
No. Actually, we're more focused on efficiencies, automation. How can we take, work or how we can take cost of labor out of the cost of doing business.
Right. Fan Jones, how you feeling?
Well, I'm not feeling that good, and part of it is that the people I care about the most weren't doing that well before the collapse. One of the things we've got to remember is that we had poor people, people who didn't have jobs before the collapse. And the idea that we should take our foot off the accelerator in dealing with the crisis, I think, is wrong-headed. Last month, the federal government's role in the recovery began to recede. 14,000 public employees lost their jobs. 4,000 in America, with the kind of educational crisis we've got going on, which we just talked about. We had 4,000 school teachers lose their jobs last month as the support for states and cities began to recede from the last stimulus. We can talk a lot about what we want to do in education, but if we're going to let school teachers fall off the table in 36 states, which is what we're looking at, a lot of the stuff is going to be moot. I also think that one of the challenges that we have in these situations is that those who have been committed to helping the chronically poor in the good times, when the boats are supposed to be rising, we're trying to get them unstuck so they can join that rising tide. But when the crash comes, they get pushed even further down. A lot of the green jobs discussion in California started out because we had a labor shortage in the green sector. In other words, we had the right policies in place here in California to put up solar panels. We had incredible entrepreneurs, great products, great technology, consumer demand. All the policies were there, but homeowners were having to wait 6 months, 8 months, 4 months to get the solar panels up. Why? We didn't have enough trained workers. We saw that as a tremendous opportunity. We said, listen, this is not rocket science. You don't have to have PhDs to put up solar panels. You can have some PhDs, some well-trained blue-collar workers. We call them green-collar workers. And we can start pulling people who've been chronically unemployed out of poverty and into the workforce, fight pollution and poverty at the same time. We thought that was pretty neat. Well, now you suddenly add 8 million newly poor people on top of the chronically poor people, and trying to get those same kids, those same jobs is almost a non-starter. So from my point of view, we've got to continue to lean forward on the basic support for the economy. I think this president, frankly, has gotten too little credit. We did a $787 billion stimulus package, recovery package. A third was tax cuts. So this president cut 95% of the taxes for 95% of Americans. He didn't get credit for that. A third was for jobs and investment. You can argue about that being could have been bigger, could have been better designed. But you had a third that was strictly support for states and cities. And what I think people should have been thinking about in this last round, in 36 states, have you seen a school teacher today? Was she in a bread line? Well, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, stimulus package. Have you heard a fire truck in the past month? Have you heard the siren? Was there gas in that fire truck's engine? Well, thank you, stimulus package. Thank you, Mr. President. So I think that people don't understand that fire and police and those kind of basic services were being supported by the stimulus. And as we back away and say, now stimulus is a dirty word, we don't want to do that anymore, what are we going to do about the catastrophic impact on basic services? So no, I don't think that we're done with this crisis at all.
Gordino, surely Silicon Valley will save us. I mean, you call Eric Schmidt at Google and say, listen, we need a couple of billion. Right? The guy's got money coming out his ears. What's going on there?
I hope you don't mind, but I brought it with me.
Yeah, all right, that's good. Very small bag under your chair, right?
If you look under your chair, it has $2 billion. Kai, no, we're not out of the woods, but we don't have to be in the weeds either. So let me offer 3 suggestions and the rationale quickly behind each one. First, raise your hand, because I've never seen it. If you have ever seen in California, anytime over the past 10 or 20 years, a comprehensive economic strategy and plan.
Yeah, no. If you raise your hand, you're lying, right? All right.
And I haven't seen it. So the first suggestion is we have to remember, if we fail to plan, we're planning to fail. And we need that plan. There are about 10 or 12 key clusters of California's economy that are about 70% of California's engine. And what I would suggest to Governor-elect Brown, to legislative leaders of both parties, not individually but collectively, reach out. Reach out and sit down with leaders in each of those economic clusters in January, December if you can. Because right now, voters, business leaders, labor leaders, everyone is enraged. We have a chance to change one letter and turn them from being enraged to engaged by asking them, what do we need to do as Californians with an economic plan? What do you need out of our education system to have an economic plan? What do you need from our infrastructure, transportation, housing, energy, water, to build that economic plan? What do we need in terms of regulations? The last question to ask, by the way, is taxes or fees. If you start there, all of us as business leaders are just going to say, cut our taxes, cut our fees. But if you start with education, pre-K, K-12, higher ed, if you then move to infrastructure, transportation, housing, etc., people get a concept of we actually have to pay for this stuff. And then when you get to taxes or fees, you have a more rational discussion on top of that. We do that at the leadership group, and I brought copies, a few copies if you want one, but each year we do a CEO survey. Last year, 153 CEOs, doesn't sound like very many. Combined annual global revenue, $1.7 trillion. We also did a survey of startup, innovation economy CEOs, 304 of them, to find out what those fueling the economic engine in high-tech, biotech, clean and green tech are thinking and concerned about. And the data is fascinating and fruitful. What were the 5 items that each of those totaling nearly 500 CEOs say that they want from California, from themselves and their employees in terms of an economic plan? Hey, we need homes that our workers can afford. We need a great transportation system. We need quality health care. We need a tax system that's rational. Those were the key 4-ish, and we need a great K-12 through higher education system. Those were the 5 keys. So the second one, we need to listen, learn, and lead. Silicon Valley CEOs, bluntly, we need a deeper understanding of the challenges facing our state. And conversely, our state leaders need to know, for domestic and multinational companies, the real-world global challenges we face to stay successful in California. And we're talking past each other. We're going to try something new in Silicon Valley, Kai, in 2011. We're pulling together a Silicon Valley caucus. There are 12 members of our state Senate and state assembly that represent some part of Silicon Valley. 12 prominent CEOs have committed the time to get together and talk to and with each other rather than past each other of what California needs to be competitive as a state and what we need as California companies to be competitive globally. The third is budget deficit and governance reform. Quick story. David Packard was our founder 34 years ago. The first time that John Vasconcellos, then an assembly member and a liberal lion of the California legislature for almost 30 years, came to meet David Packard, he was turned off. He walked into David Packard's office. He was an imposing figure. He was about 6'4". David Packard took his two fingers, poked them in John Vasconcellos' chest, and said, "You need us. You need us to produce jobs and taxes to keep this state afloat." Then David Packard did something else. He took those two fingers, he jabbed his own chest, and he said, "And we need you to build roads, an education system, and the social service programs that our employees and their families depend upon. We need each other, and we don't see that, and I need Van Jones right now to pick up my material. But we don't see that. And we keep hearing governance reform, budget deficit. I hate this term. We keep hearing it's not, quote unquote, sexy. Yeah. So let's let the next TNA be transparency and accountability, and then we can make
and other phrases
sexy.
You don't often hear at public policy conferences.
There you go. So in a moment when we come back, I want to talk taxes.
All right,
because the thought that taxes and fees aren't on the table is erroneous when we're going to invest and prosper.
And you know, it's interesting. That actually came up in both the prior panels, and so we will talk about taxes and fees. Let me, though, Van, since you're here in my line of sight, ask you whether the people that you're worried about, those people who have been pushed down into or farther down into the mud by this economic crisis that we've been having, are things that Gordino is talking about, is that real for them, or is that Swahili and they're just trying to get through their daily lives?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people now, I mean, the whole middle class now is just trying to get through its daily life. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that's happening is that the idea of the American dream itself is now under real fire. And I don't mean the consumerist crazy, I just mean the you can make it if you try version. You can, if you go to work, if you pay your taxes, if you play by the rules, you can stay in your house. You can stay employed. You can send your kids off to school, get them off your couch. You know, like that might ever happen. You know, like just that version of the American dream is under fire. And so my constituency, which used to be, you know, the chronically poor, is now them plus the newly poor plus the people who are anxious about becoming poor. I think we've got to get much more aggressive about taking advantage of the opportunities, especially in California, that present themselves. Many of them have to do with our leadership in the clean and green space, the clean energy and the green space. We attract 1 out of every $4 anywhere in the world invested in clean tech comes to California. Not to the United States, not to all 50 states, not to China. 1 out of every 4 clean tech dollars comes to one state called California.
From anywhere in the world, just to make sure?
Anywhere in the world. The global investment in clean tech, 1 out of 4 of those dollars is here. You disagree? Okay, we can talk about it. You can make a question time. But we don't translate that over into the manufacturing and making some of those products here. And so I think those are the kinds of things that we've got to be looking at so that we can actually create more opportunities for people who want to have those middle class jobs, people who want to stay in the middle class and get in the middle class.
Let me turn the conversation a little bit sideways and ask you, Fred Ruiz, if this feeling that you're having as you run a private business and as you consult with your son in the CEO's office, that this economic situation we have now might be the new normal, where businesses are trying to get labor costs out of the equation. You're not really thinking about hiring, you're worried about costs, you're worried about consumer demand. I mean, how confident are you that that will change and we will have some new kind of paradigm in the near future?
Well, we're always invested in ourselves and trying to take waste out of our system, become more efficient, more effective. That's a given, and we will continue to do that. I don't necessarily think this is a new paradigm. I think in California, businesses are not at a level playing field with other businesses throughout the nation and the world. So we have to fix that. But But no, I don't think it's a new paradigm. I think businesses are always going to be looking for new ideas and new ways to be more efficient, more productive.
Why are you still here? Is it because you started 50 years ago here?
Why am I still here?
Yeah. Why is Ruiz Foods still in Dunedin?
Well, I think, if you look at we have three major goals. One is, we believe that if our business isn't growing, it's dying. And that's really, that's part of every business. So we decided that creating a brand is really important. If we can create a brand, we can compete with anybody, in our industry. Investing in ourselves, becoming more efficient, more effective, more productive. That's also one of our mandates. And then the third mandate is just people. I learned through my mother, who was a shoe sales lady in Tulare. She was a wonderful salesperson, and she was great with people. But you have to be successful through people. And so, we really, those three initiatives, I think, are what drive our company and what have sustained our success over the number of years.
Yeah, Esmael, go ahead.
Let me echo something here. I'm going to ask a question here. How many jobs California created between 2000 and 2010? 10 years. Net. Zero. How many jobs Texas generated over that 10-year period? 1.2 million. How many jobs in Arizona? 500,000. There's something wrong here. I mean, we all talk about good things about California, entrepreneurship spirit, our higher education, our climate. There's something wrong, and I totally agree with you. No central planning is going to work. I mean, I like, putting a strategy together, talk about this. The role of government is to create competitive environment for businesses to flourish. And our government has failed. Our government cannot take its fiscal matter in order, and that's a failure. Whatever the reason is. Now, it could be our progressive taxes, it could be our proposition system. So I have a solution. You want to hear about the solution?
Please, go ahead. Governor's right over there somewhere.
First goal of government should get their house in order. And how? Fix the budget deficit. Our estimate is our deficit, and it's not long term. This year, next year, together, $22 billion. 8 billion temporary taxes are going to expire. 10 billion is going to be extra spending, which is going to kick in. 5 billion that we have current problem. Solve that problem. And then down the road, we don't have to do anything magical. Cap spending. It doesn't matter, Michael, what you do with the tax. It doesn't matter what kind of a method you devise. If tax revenue comes in, it's going to be spent. And unfortunately, we spend it unwisely, not on one-time project, on base budget. So we have to put a spending plan. One, some formula, population plus inflation. Second, we have to mandate every proposition initiative that comes on the ballot to the voters, because we love those. Have you seen it? Every election, you see tons of those. They have to specify what the source of revenue is. I mean, you can't have stem cell research is great. $3 billion. Where is it coming from? General fund. And people love it. They vote. I mean, I vote for everything. Save the birds. Why not?
All right.
And third,
right,
let me finish third.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is we have to control, I hate to say it, some of you are here, public employees' benefit and health care. We have to grandfather existing people and start with new group of employees on a 401k plan. If you look at the private companies, anybody who had defined benefit plan, they went out. You can't afford it. And fourth, this is very radical. You ready? Privatize UC system.
Yeah, all right.
Because
he didn't even blink.
Yeah, she didn't even blink. Why? Because the purpose of UC system was anti-poverty and it's out. 80-90% of the kids that go to UC system are coming from rich families that they don't need taxpayer support. I mean, that's the extreme view. But I gave you three more realistic solutions.
So I'll tell you
the
what.
Fourth one, it would never get anywhere.
Yeah.
I know.
So the next panel is the politics of all this, okay? But here's where I'm going to turn to, which is actually going to be a great panel. But let me turn to Carl Gordino and say, here's your chance on taxes, man, because we can't afford any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Go.
Thank you. Well, first, again, we need transparency and accountability so that voters know what they're getting to evaluate it. And to build on his point, California Forward is doing some amazing, important, and groundbreaking work where they actually looked at the 49 other states and said, what's working there in terms of budget and governance reform? What might be applicable in California, and how do we get it adopted through the legislative process or the initiative process? That's where we got, finally, after 7 attempts, redistricting reform in November of 2008. That's where we got, thanks to a lot of work by Becky Morgan and others, the June primary, the open primary reform on the governance side. So there are a couple of steps. There's about 15 component parts. We don't agree with all of them, but about 13 or 14. Not bad when you're talking about reform of our budget and governance system. So review that. On taxes for us, let me just establish some credibility. The Silicon Valley Leadership Group, in our 33-year history, we've supported more tax measures than we've ever opposed. There is an invest and prosper perspective of Silicon Valley that if you want good schools, good roads, good transit, good health care, et cetera, you got to pay for it. The stuff doesn't happen magically. We have sponsored more tax measures on transportation, housing, open space, energy, et cetera, than we've ever opposed. But if we're going to ask voters again for money out of their own wallets, we've got to get to some of those provisions. Initiative reform, 2-year budget cycle, auditing that the legislature is supposed to do. Maybe they should be focused on that every other year instead of bills every single year. Second, as you said, citizens want to see no more bells. We need to look seriously, all levels of government, at pension reform and some of those issues if we're going to stay afloat. As we do that collectively, and we can do that collectively, that will show voters that we, as a society, public and private sector, are on the right track as we need to pick what we're going to invest in. And the last item on taxes, it is frustrating to a group of business leaders who support so many tax measures when the solution is, this is important to me, so you are going to pay for it. If it's important to the success of California, other than the poorest of the poor, we should all be part of the solution and responsible for the success of California rather than you're $5,000 richer than me, so that's the limit, you pay for it, or you corporation, or you interest group. Let's all collectively invest in California.
You want to say something on tax? Go ahead.
Well, I just want, since we're putting out proposals to make the world a better place, I have a few.
All right, so give us a couple, like two, maybe three.
That's good.
It's a short conference, man.
That's good. That's good. First of all, I would like somebody to correct my numbers. My understanding is that 1/4 of all the global venture capital invested in clean tech companies was here. Okay, good enough.
All right.
Good.
Somebody with an eye for
venture capital, not
venture capital.
So,
all right.
So good.
Fair enough.
So just what. Good enough.
All right.
Good enough. But it might suggest that if we've got that much going on the lab coat and PhD side, we might want to have more going on with the hard hat side. And one way to get there, just some ideas. There's something that's horribly named thing called the feed-in tariff, which most people think has to do with agricultural subsidies or something. It's actually a very smart way to deploy renewable energy technology. I call it get solar panels on your grandmama's house legislation. Because there is the opportunity now for people to be what are called prosumers in the energy space. In other words, it's legislation that helps the utility company cut a deal with you where you get to be a producer and a consumer of energy. And often low-income people live in low-lying places where the sun's beating down on them. They should be getting a check from the energy company rather than having to write a check to the energy company. So let low-income people become a part of the energy solution for California. There's something called a feed-in tariff that can help with that. That's something that could be done here and done well. At a more national level, I think what we've got to be able to do, unless we want, there will be green jobs on planet Earth. There will be a lot of them, and it's because of this cult. It's a cult of math, okay? The math is we're going to have about 10 billion people on the planet, 9 billion, 10 billion, a lot of people. All of them are going to want to have a car or access to one just like you, a refrigerator or access to one just like you, or an iPad, which you don't have right now but will have at Christmas. So,
wait, have you been talking to my wife?
Yes.
All right.
All of those products require energy. Right now we rely mostly on fossil fuel. That's a wasting resource. But there's going to be an increasing demand for energy, and the supply is at least going to be flat, if not declining. So energy innovation is going to be a big part of the new century. You can do the math and figure that out. So the question is, who will have the jobs producing the products that begin to fill in that gap? Well, right now, our good friends in Asia, who I have great love and respect for, are smart enough to be putting 100% of their resources trying to capture that market. They want the production for all those products to freeze in Asia. So we will go from importing dirty energy from the Middle East to importing clean energy technology from Asia and skip the jobs and entrepreneurship in the middle. That is the big threat. If you take that big opportunity away from the American middle class, you have a hard time figuring out where the other big global play is to replace it. You've got to have policies in place to help us grab a share of those jobs. Now, I would say you could do three things. You could do them in the lame duck, and now it seems like you're not going to be able to do things lame duck. This is so good for red states and blue states, you can do them in January if you want to, as soon as they swear them in. Three things. Number one, you have a renewable energy standard. In other words, you tell America's utility companies that they're going to have a renewable energy goal, say 20% by X date, which automatically creates demand for these products. If every utility company in America is going to have a responsibility to try to be using homegrown American clean energy, they're going to have a demand for the products. Then you have either a green bank, an infrastructure bank, or loan guarantees to help to deal with the supply for capital. And then you put in place a green workforce training program. And you can begin to capture some of the private dollars out there in the world that right now are, if you're smart, if you got a bunch of money, you want to build a wind turbine company, you wouldn't build it in the U.S. You build it in Asia. You got certainty of demand over there. We don't have certainty of demand here. We put all our bets on this big climate bill. That's not going to happen. But we can still create certainty of demand with a renewable energy standard, which will then attract to this country the global investment so we can tap our own Saudi Arabia of clean energy and create jobs. There are solutions, but we've got to get out of this sort of partisan food fight. This would be good for red states and blue states. Last thing I'll say, when we deploy renewable energy in America, we're not generally going to be deploying that in the middle of cities. The wind farms, the solar farms, that's cowboy energy. That's red state energy. That's rural folks' energy opportunity. So you can build this stuff in blue states, deploy it in red states, good for both states, good for both parties, good for America, good for the earth.
Let me pause here and make a brief moderator announcement. About 10 more minutes, we're going to start taking questions from the floor. We'll do that for about 15 minutes. But think about what you want to ask these guys, because there's some good thought up here. You wanted to weigh in on
just on the taxes. You know, speaking as a business person, I would support raising taxes, but they'd have to be certain specifics. One, they'd have to be short term, because I'm not going to be in favor of just an increase in taxes. I think there needs to be some quid pro quo. I mean, I would like to see for the legislature to give back to businesses. We have a lot of regulatory issues, so we need regulatory reform. There's job killer bills that are being introduced on a regular basis that make it even more difficult for businesses to survive. So, so you mentioned the pension issues, but there needs to be some kind of a commitment from the legislator to in good faith, reduce the cost of doing business in California. From a government perspective. I want to just add one other thing, and that is that it's really, really important that we start looking at each other as a resource, and we've got to start looking. We've got to start creating partnerships. When I was chair of the California Chamber of Commerce 2 years ago, I elected to meet with every member of the Latino caucus, because I'm a Latino, being a Latino in the chamber, I'm trying to figure out why isn't there a better relationship between these two great organizations. And it was very frustrating for me, because I didn't feel that there was an appreciation for each other, and for a lot of different reasons. But partnerships are really, really important, and the legislator is going to have to sit down with certain organizations and in good faith create a collaborative effort so that you make a commitment to do something, and I trust that you're going to do it, and I'm going to make a commitment to do something, and I'm going to trust that I'm going to do that. That is the only way that we are going to make honest, true progress, in trying to do something that is with it. Raising taxes really is part of the solution. I believe that. And against my out-of-state peers, who would say, you're crazy for community. I would do that. I'm a Californian. I believe in this state. I believe that there's great value, and this is just part of giving back. So, but it's got to be temporary. I will not do it, on a sustainable basis.
I'm going to ask you to step out of your economist role here for a second and address what Fred was just talking about, this idea of good faith and the fact that there needs to be intellectual honesty in some of these conversations, and it sort of seems like that's missing.
Well, definitely. First of all, I sit on a board of financial institutions, and it's funny, it's a credit union. And it's one of the largest, $8 billion credit union. And we try really to serve and help our community. But who's against us and put roadblock? Can you guess? Bankers. And we're both trying to serve the same community. I think the special interest in this state is totally out of control. I hate to say it. And when you say about uniformity, common cause, working for the state, I mean, you can see everybody is going after their own interest, and it is really sad what's going on. Now, I don't want to attack clean energy, but again, I mean, clean energy realistically is not going to generate lots of jobs. But there are lots of effort for government to create subsidies for that particular industry. Now, maybe in the long run that pays off.
What came first, the job or the subsidy, right? I mean, that's where we are.
Exactly. And there are certain other areas that people are begging for subsidy or reduced taxation. I think we have to identify, as you said, and I agree totally, what is important for the state to prosper. Yeah. And that would be what? Education, infrastructure, good water quality, roads. And this is what the government has to focus on, and business community has to chip in. And if it means you have to pay higher taxes to ensure that, because the beneficiary would be everybody in the state, not a particular industry. If we pass that barrier and get to that point, I think we can accomplish quite a bit. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And you can see, different special interest groups are pulling the strings to just get a couple of, few feet ahead of others. And as long as we have that, whether it's in business community, within the state, with state and business community, we're not going to get anywhere.
I can't wait to see how the political panel answers all those questions. That's the next one. Let me ask you, though, Fred Ruiz, this idea that analysts and economists always talk about businesses wanting certainty. They want to know what's going to be happening so they can plan. First of all, is that true? I mean, do you need to know that? Or can you just wing it?
No, we can't wing it. We really need to know, what the future, holds for us, so we can plan for it. So it's vital. We talked about the strategic planning process. I think strategic planning is vital to what we need to do here in California. Yes. I think we need to spend some time thinking about, laws. Is it a good law or is it a bad law? If it's if special interests help create this law, then it's probably a bad law because it isn't a win for everybody. When you make laws, please, whatever you do, it's kind of the Hippocratic Oath for the doctors. Do no harm, because we have a lot of legislators that are creating laws that are doing a great deal of harm, and that hurts everybody. And it's very short term in the process. Long term, it will. It's very self-destructive, and we need. So that needs to be understood.
Carl, weigh in on that. Lawmakers and legislators doing economic harm. Go ahead, do it. Nobody's listening.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're expecting lawmakers, usually very well-meaning, elected by their constituents, to be experts on the economy, and they're not. By and large, lawmakers are not from a business background. That isn't necessarily a fault if we do our role in the kind of the David Packard way of reaching out to make sure that we're speaking with each other and explaining our perspectives. Let me give you an example. One of my favorite U.S. senators, and I love all 100 of them equally, is Dianne Feinstein. And in a very public but positive way in August, we were hosting with about 400 CEOs. And from the stage, she said, Carl, what I need you to produce in the next few weeks is a white paper. What would it take for the federal government to do, back to what you said, to create an environment to foster U.S. manufacturing jobs again? That's not her expertise, Kai. But she had the good sense and judgment to ask the people who create jobs. So, we did. 4 weeks later, we pulled together a lot of CEOs, and it's not exhaustive, but it's pretty comprehensive. 6-point plan on doing that. She's now running with some of these for legislation in 2011 in a very bipartisan way because we took the time to sit down. Governor-elect Brown's team called on Sunday and said, we love that piece, do it for California. So in the next 3 to 4 weeks, another group of CEOs, similar white paper, and that's what we can do when we listen to each other rather than just react to each other. And too much blame game. We're all Californians. There are 38 million different people with different perspectives, but a lot of common ground around a 12.4% unemployment rate. So what we're trying to do is fix the engine while we're still flying the plane. The good news from a Silicon Valley perspective, we make the impossible possible every day. And in Sacramento, when legislators talk about the politics is the art of the doable, that's their same mindset to our view in Silicon Valley. So let's build these and implement them.
All right, so raise your hands. There are microphones running around. Wait for one to get to you because it's a big room. Don't be bashful. Somebody's
By
got to
the
be
way,
first.
as the mics are going around, if
Ladies
I
over
may,
there.
I brought extra copies of these. And if you want them, seriously, if you want them, the CEO surveys, they make great stocking stuffers. And really, I gave my wife a copy of last year's for Valentine's. She's still talking about it.
You're just too much fun, man. She's still talking about it. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
All right, does anybody have a mic in front of them with a question? Yeah? Please go ahead over there. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm very intrigued by this.
I'm sorry, do me a favor, identify yourself first, please.
Oh, my name is Lisa Helene Lawson. I'm very intrigued by this idea of a green bank. And it would seem to me that there isn't an industry in this country that would not be in need of a green bank to have the knowledge and technical transfer that they would need to move into the green industry area. And I'm wondering if there is a green bank in any other state or any other country that you know of, or if there is a model. Do you have an actual model of such of the green bank? Because again, I would be very skeptical about how much really our economy could benefit from pouring a lot of money into this area without that instrument. And the other piece of this is I believe in public and private partnerships. If there isn't a green bank, do you see that as a role that could be fulfilled by a public-private partnership? And in regard to current venture capital in Silicon Valley, that used to be where entrepreneurs could go. Is there still that capital flowing? Because we know in the private sector it is not, and I'm sorry for a long-winded question.
We'll take the first two and talk about the green bank, man. Make us smart, and then we'll get you the Silicon Valley thing in a minute.
You want to do green bank and I'll do venture capital?
That's good. All right.
That's a panel working together right there.
Exactly. Well, there are small models, but there's actually proposed federal legislation to make it happen. I mean, the great thing about this stuff is that if you go with loan guarantees, you can put one public dollar on the table, you can leverage in 10 private dollars. There are ways to do some of the stuff that we're talking about to rebuild America that doesn't break the bank, that actually helps to actually begin to pay for itself. I did want to just respond because you talked about there's not going to be a lot of jobs coming out of this. You're right and you're not right. It's amazing. When we first started talking about this clean energy opportunity, we were so excited because we said, oh my goodness, if we do this right, we might be able to get 2 million jobs. We were like, 2 million jobs, It seemed like this incredible thing because we had a functioning economy. Now, we could get every green fantasy job you could imagine. We'd still have this huge hole. We never said in the green jobs movement that we were going to solve every economic problem in America and that everybody in America is going to be putting up solar panels. That's how we're going to. But we did make a claim, and it's still a valid claim, that we can create an awful lot of jobs that would be either in somebody else's country or wouldn't exist if we did energy differently. I just want to make sure people do know, in this economy, as awful as it is, with this Congress, as missing in action as they have been on this issue, failure to do comprehensive energy reform, et cetera, just to give you a sense of how well the green economy is doing nationally, there are 80,000 coal miners in America. They are America's heroes. They risk their lives, their limbs, their lungs every day to keep the lights on, to keep powering us the same old way. 80,000 people got up this morning and went to those coal mines. There are 80,000 Americans that got up this morning and went to work in the wind industry today. The solar industry today in this economy with no help from Congress, it supports 46,000 jobs today. That's not including smart batteries, smart grid, energy efficiency, et cetera. So you're right. We're not going to be able to take we won't be able to soak up half or 2/3 of this hole we've got with these jobs. But these are real jobs and real opportunities, and I don't think we should poo-poo them.
Fair enough. Right. Carl, Silicon Valley, Sand Hill Road, all that money, right?
Sure, thank you. First on VC investment. Again, in the last snapshot over a several-month period, 45% of all the venture capital invested anywhere in the United States in clean and green tech was in Silicon Valley. The only other region in the country to have double-digit was the LA Basin with 13%. The rest were single-digit. So we continue to see VC investors put their wallets where their words are and bet on Silicon Valley and in California. It's a true strength. The only thing I would say, and partly in humor, but it's a mission, the element is silicon, not silicon, and never say silicone. That is the San Fernando Valley, not silicon.
And we're back to TNA there, man. I don't know where you're taking this panel, but
Kai, one other thought on Silicon Valley, if I may.
All right.
When we talk about the green economy, and I got into a fascinating discussion with a legislator, well-meaning California legislator from Butte County, who kept referring to California's economy as the real economy as opposed to that clean and green economy. It's both. It's one economy. Remember, the green economy is products, to be sure. 74 of our 335 members do solar, wind, biomass, construction materials, etc. But it's also policies. All of our companies are being smart with their energy because they can save money, so it's policies. But it's also our people. On transportation, 40% of California's greenhouse gases, 53% in the Bay Area, are our daily transportation decisions. So as we're moving to a green economy to make us more energy efficient, Fred, again, it makes us more efficient on the dollar as business leaders as well, and that's just smart.
Super. There was there was a microphone over here someplace, no? Yes, all the way in the back. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jean Templeman, and I was interested in, I guess earlier in the program, a gentleman talked about when there's a decrease in industrial jobs that create wealth and an increase in service jobs, wealth isn't created. And I'm a nurse and a social worker, and my area of expertise is working with parolees and probationers. And California is just got a huge industry, a service industry of people who are incarcerated. So rehabilitation instead of warehousing and getting some of these folks rehabilitated and working, green jobs, whatever, would be very enlightening.
Fan thoughts?
I did not pay her to say that. But
no pun intended.
Yeah. Amen. I mean, one of the big things we've got to look at in California is how much money we are spending on this incarceration industry that we have here. If we're talking about kids and the future of kids, depending on how you do the math, we're spending between $100,000 and $120,000 per year per kid locked up in the youth prison system here. You could send 2 kids to Yale or 3 kids to Yale for the cost of sending 1 kid to jail in California. Now, one thing that I think people don't know is that some very smart reform efforts have been underway in the youth prison system. We've actually been able to close in California, and I think the economists would be interested in this, we've actually been able to close in California 3 youth prisons with no increase at all in youth violence or youth crime, because it turns out that there are much smarter ways to spend that money. I would argue for some competition here. What if in California we set up a competition to figure out and said to the wardens, you send people back to our community. We give you this money. You send people back to our community. If they stay out of the system, if you've been smart, if you prepared them to stay out of the system, you get more money, right? So you can keep doing it. But if you send people out and they come back with 4 more guys in 6 months, which is what's going on, guess what? You get less money. And create some financial incentive, align the financial incentives so that suddenly the wardens start competing with each other. Here's what they will instantly do. They will quickly discover yoga teachers are cheap Meditation teachers are cheap, right? Art instructors are cheap, and they, counselors, Al-Anon programs are cheap, and they will bring into the prison system those very cheap things that we know actually make people's lives better and start sending people home and saving us money. I think we've got to become much more smart about how to align the incentives to begin reducing the population of the prisoners without increasing the violence in the community.
Yeah. Carl, hang on one second. We're going to
and save money on both sides.
Yeah. Amen, brother. You had a thought on manufacturing versus service?
Well, I am a manufacturer, and I look at manufacturing as a great business because we're a producer of goods, and I think there's something meaningful about producing goods versus producing services. But I when I look at the
when you say meaningful, you mean tangible, right?
Tangible.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that. But I think in California we are losing our manufacturing base. And I think I look at that as a strategic loss because we do create jobs. I think we foster research because we're constantly looking for new products. I think, when you talk about creating jobs, we create jobs for professionals as well as vocational people, people that are, that are in trades and whatnot. And I just think manufacturing can play such an important role to fixing California's ills, economic issues. And if we could just do a better job creating a better environment for manufacturing, I think that would be extremely helpful.
Carl.
Thank you, Kai. I want to go back to her excellent point. The recidivism rate in California is 70%.
70%.
70%. Texas, which is not exactly a soft on crime state, is less than half of that. As California Forward has shown, we need to be finding out from other states what they're doing well on these issues and finding out what's applicable in California. We know by third grade whether folks are going to be going to prison, basically on literacy alone. So that investment that Van talked about is key. The only place I disagreed with Van's comments about Yale at 100 to 120,000, that's because they're not picking a CSU, a UC, or a California.
Touche.
Fair enough.
Touche. Fair enough. Last question, I think. Probably, is there one? Did I see a microphone or a hand back there? Yes? No? All right, well, I'll tell you what. If you guys are out of question, go ahead, Van. What do you want to say?
I would be remiss if I didn't say one thing. There was a comment made about climate injustice. And I just want to say that the idea that poor people are not more at risk in a world with a climate gone mad can be refuted by 3 syllables. Katrina. Katrina. We know for sure. Carbon does not concentrate only on poor people, that is true. But people are differently able in their ability to get away from the effects. It'd be like saying, well, here's a big tidal wave coming up onto our boat. It won't concentrate on the people in the wheelchairs, so let's not worry about them. That's not the right way to go forward. I think we've got to make sure that the most vulnerable people in our state, who we know will be hurt first and worst by economic and ecological catastrophes, are protected. But we also got to make sure they don't benefit last and least from the economic upside. That will make California a great state.
All right. I think we're going to leave it there. We're a little bit over time. Jed?
Good job, Thank you.